allow a couple seconds for everyone to get settled. You'll notice that when you join the call, you're just automatically muted. That's just because there's multiple people on the call today. But this is very much a collaborative session, so you'll have an opportunity to ask questions, unmute yourself at points, or you can also use the chat. We'll keep an eye on that to make sure that questions and comments are all addressed. This session is also being recorded, so if you want to access it and watch it back or make any notes on it later on, you can access it on the same page that you used to register for, and I'll share the link to that in the chat later on. We're joined here today by Kayla Tychsen. She's joining us from, where are you based again? You're in Lebanon currently, correct?
So actually right now we're in Amman, Jordan.
Okay. Wonderful. So we've had a very international parenting session because we've had someone join us from India, someone from Australia, and now Jordan. So it's very great to have an international based parenting series. And we're here today to talk about addressing behaviors. I'll pass it over to Kayla so she can talk a little bit more about her topic, but definitely feel free to leave any questions or comments in the chat. All right, Kayla, I'll let you take it from here.
Thanks so much. And thank you all for being here. Thank you so much for having me, Camilla. And yeah, I think, sometimes we can just be completely thrown for a loop in one, why our child is behaving in a certain way, and then how to address it in a way that is effective. And also, I think as people who are familiar with the Montessori method, in a way that's respectful, in a way that honors the child as a human being in their development. So I would really love to share a framework that can help guide us. Oftentimes we have maybe been raised in a way, or our culture has taught us to look at behavior in a way that sees behavior as something that needs to be managed or controlled. Sometimes we've come to parenting with our own parenting past where, punishments were used, maybe, even aggressive or violent punishments in an effort to control behavior. So I believe that we're missing something when we do that. I think that a lot of the research that's out today and a lot of the parenting that's out there today is advocating for a more respectful approach, an approach that that removes that violence, the approach that does seek to understand. But I think a lot of times, when we're turning away from this more authoritarian form of parenting and maybe embracing gentle parenting or conscious parenting, we're often, maybe feeling like, what do we do instead? How, we know what we don't want to do, but how do we approach it? How do we see behavior, especially things that are problematic, behaviors that are hurting people maybe, or that are, maybe disruptive or, harming the environment. And so I think that, people have started saying this, I think a lot, and maybe you've heard this before: behavior is a form of communication. And so, especially when we're talking about young children who don't actually, can't even use words, or maybe they're very articulate, but if we look at the brain and how the brain works, when that amygdala starts firing, a lot of times that upstairs brain, that logical reasoning, decision-making brain shuts off. And so even for older children who, maybe they are very articulate, they can even at times articulate in stressful moments their feelings and their needs. But then there are other times when they just can't. And so I think a very helpful way to look at behavior is using this model, and I'm going to share my screen here. Nope, that's not it. Let's see. Let's try again. So, seeing our child's behavior as a flower. So the flower is all the things that we can see, and the behaviors that are oftentimes, frustrating or triggering for us, or behaviors that we just aren't sure what to do with, and may or may not be problematic, especially when it comes to things like hitting and kicking. But also, things just like my child is not listening to me. They're not following directions right now. They're not doing what we need to be doing. We need to be leaving the park, and they're running in the opposite direction. And so it's easy to see the behavior, right? That's what we're frustrated by sometimes. That's what is sometimes triggering for us and our nervous systems. And so it takes some intentionality, it takes some digging to actually get to those root causes of the behavior. And so, things like unmet needs, right? I think we all can think of a time where our child, got to bed late, and that next day, it's a lot, and they need sleep, and they're tired, and their behavior is 100% a reflection of that hunger, right? That hangry, we're out and about, forgot a snack, and meltdown. Even things like having a full bladder, and feeling that discomfort, when we're aware of brain development, aware of the nervous system, and we're going to talk about that in a minute and go a little bit more into that. But this is really key for understanding and addressing our child's behavior when we're aware that they can't access that upstairs brain. They can't access that decision-making brain, that learning brain, because their limbic system has taken over. They're in fight or flight. We look at physical discomfort, sickness, pain, and then the quality of the connection with the caregiver. And so looking at these root causes is really key when understanding and addressing our child's behavior, because it's these root causes that when addressed, it's going to take care of the behavior. If we can just get curious and empathetic and dig a little deeper, then and when I say it can resolve the behavior, I also want to say that that's not always the goal. Sometimes our child really just needs to express what they're feeling, and they need a safe person to do that with. And so, it's our job as parents, as caregivers, to set those boundaries and make sure that they're safe, that we're safe, that other people are safe. But really being able to get curious, get empathetic, and understand what's going on for our child. So a couple examples that I have come up recently, where we can kind of see this at play, and maybe you're thinking through something that happened earlier today or this week, and kind of thinking through, oh yeah, that must have been a need for hunger, or maybe one of these other things. But so for one, my poor child, has had a chronic stuffy nose for way too long, and we are getting it taken care of. We've seen the ENTs, and it's resolving. But there was a point where I realized that it was this stuffy nose that was very uncomfortable for her. And a lot of the behavior started making sense around that. And so just doing something as simple as addressing that stuffy nose has helped tremendously. Another example that happens I would say somewhat regularly when I'm not paying attention and when I, don't catch it. If I've been really focused on working on a project, maybe I'm working on my phone, maybe on the computer, and I've missed my daughter's cues of wanting to connect. Looking back, I can see, oh, there were those bids for connection. There was that, she came over and kind of peeked her head over. She, called my name. And if I've missed a couple of those, that's usually when the dysregulation starts, and her bids for connection become more obvious, and usually a bit more disruptive, and usually a bit more triggering for me. And so it might be bugging her sister. It might be, coming and trying to type something on my computer. But seeing that, because my first reaction is to get in that fight or flight state, which we'll talk about in a minute. But if I can see those annoying behaviors as her trying to communicate a need for connection, then I'm much more able to address that and solve that before I, get dysregulated, and then my behavior becomes something that I don't want to be displaying or using, those more a lot of times those more punitive forms of discipline can come out of that dysregulated nervous system. So we are going to talk about the nervous system now. Let me share another image with you. So the role of the polyvagal theory has been really foundational. And Dr. Stephen Porges created this framework for understanding how our nervous systems respond to the world around us. And it explains that our behavior is often influenced by how safe or unsafe we feel at a physiological level. So there are 3 states of the autonomic nervous system. This green one down here is the social engagement state. This is where our child and us, we feel connected and calm. We're able to play, we're able to engage. So social engagement, this really is all about being able to be connected with people. We have curiosity and openness. We can also make good decisions. We can access that, logical thinking and focus on details. And this is where we best learn. So in a classroom setting, this is where we learn best, when we are in that calm, connected state, when we feel safe. So as our nervous systems pick up threats from the environment, that arousal increases. And this is when our bodies release hormones like cortisol and adrenaline. This is where we go into that fight or flight. And I think we can all think of experiences where we have been in that kind of state, where we feel, right? We can often feel it in our bodies, that heat rising up, that tension, that tightening of muscles in our bodies. And this, at the foundational level, these responses are not negative. They, are designed to keep us alive and safe. If there was a lion, we need that sympathetic nervous system to kick in, and we need that fight or flight to stay alive. The problem is, a lot of times our body is picking up cues of threats that aren't life-threatening. And so we might go into that fight or flight state with something as simple as our routine being thrown off, or our child bringing up things from our own past. If we grew up in a home where anger was not an acceptable emotion, and our child is expressing anger in very loud and very big ways, then our body might pick that up as cues of unsafety, and we go into that fight or flight. And then as that arousal increases, that goes into the shutdown, the freeze or collapse state. And so this is where we go into that shutdown, that numbness, that disassociation, that helplessness. For a child, this might look like withdrawing or becoming uninterested in activities. And so it's normal to go into these states. What we want to get good at for ourselves, what we want to model for our children, and what we want to help our children be able to do is to come back into that social engagement. And so a lot of times when our nervous systems aren't being addressed, we can actually stay in those heightened states for much longer than we need to. And we can see how things like, living in chronic stress, living with hormones like cortisol and adrenaline really affect our bodies. They affect our ability to learn. They affect our ability to make decisions. And so coming back down into that social engagement is our job as parents to do for ourselves. And then it is our job to help our children do. And so that is what co-regulation is. It's helping our child come back down into a place of connection, of openness, of groundedness. And this is where our child is going to thrive. This is where they're going to be able to learn and focus and engage. And so our nervous systems are always speaking to each other. So our nervous systems pick up how other nervous systems are feeling, which makes sense in some of those interactions that we can see with our children when, they're getting dysregulated, and then we feel in our bodies this dysregulation, and then their dysregulation increases, and it can be an unhelpful cycle. But being able to regulate ourselves, being able to use cues of safety to help our child regulate is really key. And so we do that. A lot of these cues of safety are what we actually have to do with our bodies. So coming in slow and low, lowering our voices. My voice is a little scratchy right now, but shifting to a melodic voice that isn't monotone, but has that melody in it where it's kind of sing-songy, softening our gaze and our facial expressions, and coming from that place is going to communicate that relational safety. And so Mona Delahook has done a lot of really helpful work, and she utilizes the polyvagal theory. And she has a really great book called Beneath Behaviors that I have found really helpful, highly recommend. And so when we look at that, when we go back to that flower, and I'll stop sharing my screen now. When we go back to that flower, her focus really is on getting beneath, or sorry, I think I said her book was Beneath Behavior. Her book is Beyond Behaviors. And so really looking, like we've been talking about, beyond or beneath our child's behavior to those root causes, and then being able to respond in a way that's going to help. So some of those things that can help, we've talked about those cues of safety. And as Montessorians, we know observation is key. And so observing and attuning to our child's needs to the environment, to, is there something in the environment that's overwhelming overwhelming their senses, looking at, are they tired? Are they hungry? Are they stressed? And identifying those things. And then, like we've talked about, using that co-regulation and I wanted to say to help them calm down, but also remember that, so sometimes we can want a child to calm down for our own, for ourselves, because it's triggering and stressful to us. But sometimes children do just need to express what is going on. And like I had said earlier, they just need that safe place to let all those emotions out. And so instead of it being, and not that there's necessarily anything wrong with calm down corners, or, we definitely want to be teaching our children skills, but the most important way that they're going to learn self-regulation is through experiencing co-regulation again and again and again and again. And so learning how to regulate our nervous systems when we're finding ourselves going into that fight or flight or freeze, and us having those tools and using those tools ourselves, and being able to hold space for our child and communicate that safety. A lot of times sensory support can be really helpful. So, sometimes behavior can be triggered by sensory input, but also nervous systems can be calmed by different sensory input. And this is going to be different for every child. So some children might need a dulling of the sensory input. Others might need increased sensory input. I know one of my children, she really, what brings her calm is moving through space. And so anything that involves, bouncing or a swing, or if a lot of times in those moments, using that connection and that co-regulation, I'll be able to just pick her up and we're connecting through touch and just kind of swing her through the air. Also, engaging the senses might help. Well, and we kind of talked about engaging the senses. I guess what I actually mean by that is bringing a focused attention to the senses. When we're aware of our bodies, we're much more able to regulate our emotions. And so this is really helpful for us as well, tuning into our bodies. A lot of times we've been taught, learned to kind of disconnect from our bodies, be very much in our minds and ignore bodily sensations. Being able to pause and really feel our bodies and sense where in our bodies we're feeling that tension is really helpful. And then also to really pick a sense to focus on. Maybe it's smells and really focusing on that sense of smell. Maybe it's really focusing on the ground under our feet, or what our fingers are touching, and just really focusing on that sensation, bringing that focused attention. And you can even move through each one of the five senses to really help ground the mind and body. So rebuilding that safety through connection, asking ourselves, what is going to communicate safety to my child right now? For some children, they're going to want to be held. For others, that's going to be too intense and they don't want to be touched. And that's okay too. We really want to be paying attention to how each child receives that threat and safety. And really just being present and, using our posture like we talked about before. And then supporting that emotional expression without fixing it, like we've been talking about, not rushing in to solve it. And so when we're talking about understanding and addressing behavior, we're not trying to fix our child, and we're not trying to solve their emotions. We are seeking to understand and meet real needs for connection, for safety. Yes, sometimes, like I talked about, if my child has a stuffy nose, we're gonna go to the doctor and get that taken care of. But also, really realizing that our child doesn't need to be fixed, and it's our job to, yes, set boundaries, but also, like we've talked about, really welcoming that emotional expression, because that's really important too, for emotional regulation, for building those skills for resilience and well-being, is having a safe place to express those emotions. So what I'd love to invite you to join me in now is a visualization. And, you can, if you're like, I just want to watch for now, that's totally fine too. The recording will be available and you can always come back to this. But visualizations can be really helpful. So our brains are so amazing, and neuroplasticity says that we can actually, create new neural connections in the brain. And so even if we have been doing the same thing all our lives, we can always change that. It takes work. But what's neat is doing something different just one time helps create a new pathway in the brain. And then the more times that new way of doing things is reinforced, the stronger those connections become and the easier it is to go to that new way of responding. And so one of the ways that we can do this is through visualizations. So there are parts of our brain that can't tell the difference between something that we actually do, something that actually happens, and something we visualize. So I'm a really big fan of using our imaginations to practice these new ways of doing things. So I'd love to invite you to just kind of settle in, take some deep breaths, and you can close your eyes if that feels comfortable for you. And just focus on your breath for a minute. And taking those deep belly breaths can be really helpful, can activate that parasympathetic nervous system, bringing us back into that green social engagement, sending cues of safety and calm. And so I want you to recall a time recently where you and your child, maybe their behavior was one of those things on the list. They were maybe throwing a tantrum in the grocery store or not following directions, running in the opposite direction at the park. And a time where, just you were kind of at a loss and maybe even responded in a way that you didn't want to, but maybe you just didn't know what to do in that situation. And I just want you to recall those details. What was your child's behavior? What were they doing? And how did you react in that moment? How did you respond or react to that behavior? And then maybe what was their reaction to your reaction? And now I want you to shift your focus to your own experience. What were you feeling? And just feel that in your body. Maybe it was frustration or anger or just overwhelm. Or maybe it was fear or anxiety. And where in your body did you feel that? Was it maybe a tightness in your chest or knots in your stomach? Or maybe it was just energy. You just felt energy throughout your body. And just notice that. And now I want you to ask yourself, was there something that I was saying to myself about myself in that moment? Maybe something like, I can't do this anymore, or I am a bad parent, or I'm done. And I want you to think of a compassionate relationship in your life, someone who supports you and loves you and believes in you. It could be a spouse or a friend, or it could be a spiritual or religious leader. What would they say to you in that moment? Maybe they would say something like, you're doing your best, or it's okay to feel overwhelmed sometimes, or you are enough. And if you want to just place your hand over your chest, and if you can feel your heart beat, you can press into that and just repeat to yourself what that message was. I am enough. I am okay as I am. I'm doing my best. And now I want you to just open up your hands, like you're opening them up to your child. Now that you've experienced that going inward and looking at and feeling your own body and emotions and accepting those and having that self-compassion, you can open up to your child and connect to your child and have that compassion for them. And I want you to look beneath the behavior and think about what your child might be feeling in that moment. Were they scared or frustrated or disappointed? And just let yourself get curious about what they're going through. What unmet needs might your child have been experiencing? Was it connection? Was it autonomy? Was it a sense of safety? Was it comfort? And just notice what needs might have been present. And now just take a moment to reflect on their brain development, where they are, their age. We know that the brain isn't fully developed until 25. So if they're under 25, then chances are they sometimes can't access that logical upstairs brain. And just think about their nervous system and if something might have been pushing them into that fight or flight response or that freeze response. And now that we've taken a moment to consider those things, I just want you to imagine yourself in that moment now responding to those underlying needs. What might you do to address those and to offer those cues of safety? And just imagine yourself with that new response. You can take another deep breath in and out and come back to the present. And so things like this visualization can really, like I said, help us to create those new pathways for responding differently in the moment. So we can practice this, in times where we're not experiencing, that threat or fight or flight state. And it'll help us to more easily be able to do that when we're in, even when we're in, under stress. So, I hope that was helpful for you. I am so grateful to be able to be here today and just share some tools and some things that have really helped me and I know have really helped some of the people that I've worked with. I think to sum things up, when we're really seeking to look beyond the behavior, look beneath the behavior, get curious, access that empathy, that's really when we can have those connected relationships, which is the foundation for well-being across the board. And all the research, well-being is all about having those healthy relationships, those connected relationships. And so, and we really get to be the foundation for that as parents and also as caregivers. So I also just wanted to mention that I have a transformational parenting cohort, which is a 6-week program, and we dive deeper into the things that we talked about today. And we really go into nervous system science, attachment, brain development, communication, and boundaries. And so our next cohort begins November 5th. So if you want more information on that, you can visit montessoriexpat.com. And everyone here will get $50 off of the cohort. So it'll go from $350 to $300 with the code discount for the number 4 me. So yeah, and I'd love to open it up to questions. We have a little bit more time if anyone has any questions.
Thank you so much, Kayla. I shared the link there in the chat in case anyone's interested.
Awesome.
I have a private message here question. I'm going to read it out. What are some specific calming techniques I can teach my child to use when they feel frustrated or overwhelmed?
Yeah, that's a great question, especially because we do want to be helping our children, right, build these skills of regulation. And we talked about how co-regulation is the biggest way to do that. So every child is unique and every nervous system is unique, and that's very much dependent on our experiences, on even past trauma can play into that. And so sometimes what works for one child might not work for another child, but when we're looking, one of the most basic things is that deep breathing. Some children, though, they're not going to want to be told to take some deep breaths. And I think we can relate to that. If I was upset and my husband said, "Why don't you just take some deep breaths?" That wouldn't feel that would not go well. And so really coming from a place of that empathy and presence and validating of feelings is, and giving that support in that way of validating feelings is really helpful. But yeah, there are definitely ways, we're talking about the sensory, using the senses to calm a child. Some children are very stimulated by loud sounds and maybe bright lights. And so that for that child, it would make a lot of sense to go into a dark, quiet room together. Not isolating our child by themselves, because then they're not able to access that co-regulation, but going together into a quiet, dark room, and kind of being able to dull that sensory input. And helping them label their emotions. So when we're talking about helping children develop those skills, that emotional intelligence, that emotion regulation. We're wanting to help integrate those right and left hemispheres of the brain. So, maybe we've heard the term name it to tame it or name it to frame it. But this idea of, we're welcoming the emotion and then we're helping our child name it. And a lot of times that does, even for us, when we're able to identify what emotions we're feeling, that can help to start regulating our systems. And then again, bringing that awareness to the body as well can be really helpful.
Thank you. We have a question here in the chat. For children that just want to be left alone when they're upset, how can we connect with them when they are pushing us away?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So I would say, yeah, we don't need to force, physical touch or affection in any way. We can try to be present in a way that's very unthreatening and unassuming, and just letting our child know that we're there if and when they need us. And yeah, I would say definitely not forcing them to, look us in the eye or do these things that maybe we would consider connection, because that can be really threatening for certain children and certain nervous systems. Forcing someone to give you eye contact or, forcing that physical touch can be really dysregulating. So, yeah, I would just say, back to that coming in low and slow, not forcing interaction, but just being present and available for them.
Any other questions before we wrap up? Those were some good questions, so thank you. All right, I did mention that I would share again the registration page where tomorrow you'll be able to find the recording to the session. So if you want to reference anything that we discussed, you can do that using this link starting tomorrow. And you can also go ahead and register for our final parenting session, which is going to be next Wednesday evening. So look forward to seeing you all there. If you have any questions or you want to reach out to Kayla, I believe all your contact information is on Montessori Expat, correct, Kayla?
Yes.
Find all that there. Great. And I shared that link there. All right. Thank you so much, Kayla, for joining us all the way from Jordan. It must be very early in the morning for you. So we hope you have a great rest of your day. And thank you so much to all the parents that joined in today and shared their questions. It was very helpful. And I hope everyone took away a couple of ideas, concepts, and strategies that can help them with their parenting. Again, if you have any questions about the series, you can reach out to me personally. I'm just going to drop my email in the chat in case anyone has any questions. All right. Thank you again, Kayla, so much for sharing your time.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. And thank you all so much for joining. It was such a gift to be here with you all and to see some familiar faces. So good to see you all. And yeah, feel free to connect with me on my website.
It was a pleasure. Have a great rest of your day, Kayla, and good evening to everyone else who joined us. Bye.
Bye.